So who to start questioning? And if you can just identify yourself, and then we can proceed with the question. Don't be shy. Jerry, please. Do you need a mic?
Yeah, please.
就那一个可以有，
就那里上来哦，上来问问题。
Oh, okay. Very simple question. Just one. Didn't expect that I can say something today. Sorry I did not dress before.
No.
Sorry, 各位大家新年好。Well, thanks very much for the speakers. Very good one. So I only have one question here. Because people just, oh, by the way, I'm using my Mandarin accent English.
危险啊，危险啊！
So I should be very careful. Yeah, only so people just keep talking about those false reporting. But what I'm wondering that how can accountability can be pursued against those writers who made this false reporting that is really harm the Chinese community and they really mislead the mainstream society. We have to take some legal action to protect our rights, our image, right? To make not only for Chinese community but for greater good. The older society of Canada, right? So I believe some legal action should be taken. I don't know how. Okay, so I believe some legal action should be taken against them, right? Oh, by the way, my name is Jerry. Oh, sorry, my name is Jerry, and I served as the chair of CCFIA, which is Chinese Canada Financial Investment Association. Also the senior officer of China Gold International, which is public company of gold, which is listed in TSX, Toronto Stock Exchange, and dual listing in Hong Kong. We're quite big. But I'm a little bit nervous because I'm senior officer, executive vice president of this Chinese-based company. Even though this company is really like Canadian-based company, with local company and with the name of China Gold, so I'm a little bit nervous. But only one simple question. Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you.
Oh,
You go first. You go first.
For you, address you.
Who would like to?
No, address the senator, so senator first.
Okay.
No, I can take it.
Tung has a better answer. So
I don't know better. I have a different answer.
Canadians hold the media in very high regard and put a very high priority on media freedoms, and that's why the law makes it very difficult to challenge misrepresentations on the part of media. In other words, it's very difficult to sue for false reporting, and there is a general feeling in this country that while the media may misrepresent and tell lies from time to time, in general, the media does a service to the country by keeping leaders and powerful people to account. So legal action for most Canadians, for most of us, is not an option. It's too expensive, it's too difficult, and the courts generally do not make it easy for such kinds of action. However, as you know, there are two very specific defamation claims that are in the courts now. One by MP Han Dong and the other by former Minister Michael Chan. And in my view, the final report of the Foreign Interference Inquiry supports their position very strongly, especially in the case of Han Dong. You remember the media, Sam Cooper in particular, said that Han Dong advised the Chinese Consul General to not release the two Michaels. It was a crazy idea, but the commissioner says that there doesn't seem to be any truth in that. So we'll see. I don't know what will happen, but that may be a ray of light. But make no mistake, it's a very expensive, very time-consuming effort. That's why I am proposing this new organization that I call Rights and Freedoms of Chinese Canadians. It's not an organization that provides legal defense in the first instance. Maybe over time. Over time, if I can convince civil liberties and human rights lawyers in Canada to offer their services for free, to stand up for defamation cases, maybe over time we will have an army of lawyers behind us who can take these actions. But in the meantime, this organization will research, it will document, it will expose, it will advocate, and it will put in the public eye for everyone to see why some information that's put out there just does not make sense. In the end, some people will believe what they want to believe, and you cannot change their minds. And unfortunately, we are in that period now where everyone presumes that if you are saying something that's aligned with China, we should be suspicious of you. But we need this organization to systematically collect information, to do the proper research, to understand the law, to put out counter information so that we can begin to turn the tide back. Tung, what do you think?
I want to thank the jury for the question, because it allowed me to say something that was in my speaking notes that I didn't say. So that's fantastic. I recently read the book by Orwell, and the book's name is called Revenge of the Tipping Point. In it, he talked about how opinion were changed about gay marriage. It's talk about how people's perception of a community completely changed through what he called overstory. And that's the narrative in the media, the narrative in play, the narrative in popular film, and the narrative in newspaper, as well as in sitcoms. That's the only way you can change people's perception. I think what you're getting at is not only the narrative by a certain journalist or some newspaper, because they paint the picture of Warren community and make it everyone you see that are bad. In fact, I was talking to someone in the audience, and she came over to me and I said, go Google. Google the word Chinese Canadian or Chinese in Canada. I'll bet out of 100 articles that comes up, 95% of those articles were bad things that's happening caused by Chinese Canadians. We have to change that narrative. And it's so good that you said you are a business person, you represent so many enterprises. I was talking to someone else who is going to be working for the Chinese Culture Center, and he says, yeah, I know how to do promotions. I know how to put good stories out, but I just don't have the money. Well, if you really seriously wanted to change the narrative, pull me up. Put your money where your mouth is. Because we have people here come here, buy up real estate, 5 million a pop, 10 million a pop, let it sitting there empty. Now, I put no value judgment on that. It's a fact statement that I'm making. Why can they not put it into a foundation, use the proceeds to fund the initiative that Senator Wu is talking about, to also put the stories out? Encourage newspaper. Now, back in the 1980s, when there were bad publicity about Hong Kong immigrants, Dr. David Lam, Milton Wong, and a few other people put money, Bob Lee included, put money together to establish the institute, the Laureate Institution. They hired economists to look at Ross and Coonan. to look at the positive impact of Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese investments. And they changed the narrative. Why are new immigrants coming in and also established Canadians who've got the money not doing that and do more of it? Because the legal side of it, as Sandra says, is expensive. And you look at the United States, south of our border, right? Lies are being put up every day. All you have to do is to turn on TV and look at the president. When his mouth is, the lips are moving, he is lying.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what we have to do. Thank you.
Wow, that's an excellent discussion. So I see a few hands. So lady first and the gentleman over there second. Please.
Because I come probably the furthest, so I would speak first. And I would like to also have the gender equality balance here, right? Because first, my name is Marianne Situ. I have a doctorate degree in French literature. So I am fluently trilingual. Yeah, English, French, and Chinese. And Richard knows me 25 years ago when I was working as the chief interpreter for the Goodell mission. I was also the chief interpreter for Chrétien's Team Canada. I served 4 prime ministers with distinction and 4 governors general.
3-1.
Yeah, but I was targeted. That's what I'm going to talk about. By the foreign interference inquiry, Senator Wu knows about it. I protested. I resigned from my post as a senior interpreter. I was the inaugural senior interpreter for Canadians' indigenous languages interpretation for 10 years. I was recognized not only as the Chinese interpreter, the Asian languages interpreter, the foreign languages interpreter, but also indigenous languages interpreter, okay? I put together a program for indigenous languages for the last 10 years and served the Pope's visit. I got special recognition from the CEO of the Translation Bureau for my contribution to the Pope's visit to Canada to apologize in person in the name of the Catholic Church for the residential school fiasco. And I was targeted because I was born and raised in Beijing. I was targeted through my husband, who was the director of Confucius Institute of Carleton University. Okay, since 2021, I got death threats, okay, from Australian-based Uyghur independent sympathizers, personal death threats with my picture on Facebook, all right? So that tells you I have enhanced top secret level clearance for 30 years. Okay, I'm as clean and whatever as level 4. So why? I was asking myself a question. The Chinese Canadians, not just Chinese from mainland, but also from Singapore, Huayan, we represent 1/10 of the Canadian population. After English, French, Chinese, we were the first group to be targeted. Why? Because we have the reputation of not making trouble of ourselves, just like Dr. Wang has said. Not only that, but also the Chinese community itself is divided. Someone like me, who has numerous citations of excellence by Chrétien, by all of these wonderful people from Adrian Clarkson to Mary Simon, none of that mattered. okay? No other senior interpreter was targeted, no other, only me. And I have the highest level of achievement. Nobody else has a PhD degree in French literature. Even those, my colleagues, official languages interpreters, the highest they got was a master's degree in interpretation. I have a PhD degree from University of Ottawa. I was the youngest PhD graduate. At the age of 26, I had a straight A and A+. 4 years I did it, okay? Record time, too. It was average 6.5 years. I had the only distinction from MA, from Carleton University for my MA, 1 year. And I was a Tiananmen Square protester in 1989. With that personal record, I was targeted. So nobody was safe. I tell you, no one is safe. If you think, if I keep silent, okay, I will be safe. If you think, oh, I will be contributing to the party that is safe, that is anti-China, let's say, if I contribute to Bolivia, okay, then I will be safe. Forget it, okay? If you think if I contribute to Jackmeat, I will be safe, forget it. Because Michael Chong and Jenny Kwan, those were two people with Chinese face, actually. They targeted the Chinese community first. I call them traitors of the Chinese nation. And people say I was, slandering them.
Thank you.
You know? But actually, they call me spy without any, it was baseless. You know, people issued death threats to me and my family with no basis whatsoever. And I was not allowed to speak, to talk back. The only right I had as a public servant, because I had to abide by a law that called Public Service Secrecy Act. So I was supposed to be apolitical. So I was supposed to be politically neutral. So I went to a good friend of mine whom I served as, well, now he's a senator, he's going to retire soon, Peter Harder. Okay, I don't think he will mind that I quote his name. He said, I told him what I knew, I told him my case, and he said, it will take you 10 years to win a case in the legal system. So I support what Senator Wu has said. If you bring a legal case, it will take you 10 years, and you probably won't survive it because it will shred you to pieces. They will threaten your family and everything. So I started a foundation myself. I registered a foundation by the name of Mother Goose Foundation. Why? Because I was given that name by the indigenous languages interpreters of the Pope's visit, by Elder Susie Alfred. She was 84 years old. Wet'suwet'en was the language. BC, actually. Endangered. Was only mother-daughter team. Kept teaching that language. The daughter wasn't even fluent in that language. Mother was the last surviving Wet'suwet'en speaker on earth. Susie Alfred, she gave me that name, Mother Goose, because I was their senior interpreter. I trained personally 130 indigenous languages interpreters, and they are now thriving. Okay, 30 languages. Okay, used to be 90. When I took over the file in 2014, according to United Nations, there were 90 indigenous languages in Canada. But now there are 60, because 30 of them already gone, okay? Within these 60 of them, 30 of them are still alive. So I was busy trying to save those languages. And they're really endangered because during the pandemic, out of the 130 interpreters, I lost 5. Died from the face of the earth because those were elders. They're old, 70, 80 years old. And so when the pandemic hit, they were the first ones to die. So that's why sometimes I get emotional, sometimes I get really, sorry, I took too much of time. But what I want to say is this. First, I got a foundation. Second, I'm running as the next Chief Commissioner of Human Rights for Canada. I have already put my name forward according to all the letters. I'm super qualified because I'm trilingual and et cetera, et cetera. I have 32 years of stellar record and et cetera. If I do win that, which I hope, but I don't know, because it's a GIC appointment is sometimes political. But I will represent all of you.
Good. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for the very informative remark. Jimmy, do you have some
I
data
have
to
some
share with
data
us?
to share, maybe that's easier.
Okay.
I think besides everyone's experience, but I just want to share some data. And in 2024, there is a Law Society survey. I think there's the minority lawyers in the population increased from the 12%, 12.8% in 2015, 10 years ago, to 19%, about 20% in 2022. So there is an actually improvement. But also, you also have to recognize, like, for instance, in 2006, because these data don't show on every single annual report, so some data from the past. So 2006, and then in British Columbia, there are only 690 Chinese, so-called Chinese lawyers. And because nowadays you don't ask for your ethnic background, so I don't see such data actually in recent reports. So that means it's about probably every 600 Chinese, Canadian, including PR, every per capita, like per lawyer. That's a very low percentage. And but however, Japanese lawyers and the I believe the 2022 or 2023 in Alberta, and their Law Society president is a Japanese Canadian, and then there's a BC CDA. And then that person is also Japanese Canadian, and then one is Scott Morishita, and the other one is Kyle Kawanani. And then, so they have much higher representation in the legal profession. And also, that means in order for Chinese to meet the Japanese Canadian standard, we need 1,400 Chinese lawyers, which we don't have, right? So on one hand, of course, you can collect or contributions and for litigation, and I do see a kind of some bright future for Han Dong's case, because I do see on the horizon. But on the other hand, you need to supply the community with lawyers. Without lawyers, and then you can always talk about money, but money can buy little, right? And so you need people who can understand stories from the community, because as the final report from the commissioner, and then she said very clearly, something is missing in the translation, and that happens on a daily basis in the courtroom, right? People don't understand like what's going on in this community. Like even I sometimes find it hard to understand. So it is a challenge. Then we need to actually nurture the next generation of like young professionals, not limited to lawyers.
Thank you. The next question?
Yeah. Introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you. My name is Lutfi, and I
consider Senator Wu as my mentor, actually, since I was a master's student at UBC. But I'm Southeast Asian, so I'm not Chinese, but I am leading a few organizations, including the Canada-Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and a few other Southeast Asian-based organizations. Now, my question is to any of the speakers who want to answer my question: how can other organizations, perhaps not Chinese-based or Chinese diaspora-based organizations, can collaborate and support the cause of your community, because this paranoia and witch hunt against minority groups in Canada perhaps now is really focused on the Chinese community, but it's just a matter of time, I think, where it will impact other communities. So that's my question, and just to quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a really important question. I should have mentioned that in my speech. It was part of my talking points when I was going to describe the work of this organization I want to set up. And what I was going to say is that we are not alone as Chinese Canadians in the discrimination and stigmatization that we face. Many other minority communities have faced this challenge. We know right now that Palestinian Canadians are facing this in a very severe way, much more severe in many senses than we are facing. Muslim Canadians after the 9/11 attacks. Of course, if we go back further in history, Ukrainian Canadians, Japanese Canadians, Dukables, and so on and so forth. So we have to be humble, and we have to reach out to other communities that historically have faced these kinds of challenges, and who understand that in the future they may also become victims. And I think in a way there is a special opportunity now, and that's why the title of this speech is Challenges and Opportunities. I've mostly talked about challenges, not so much opportunities. But what is the opportunity? The opportunity is that the hypocrisy and the double standards of Canadian and Western foreign policy around the world is becoming extremely clear. And while mainstream leaders who may see that are unwilling to talk about it, I think the public understands it. The public can see that something is not right. On the one hand, we preach to the world, we talk about human rights abuses, we talk about genocide here and genocide there, and we talk about how we want to change one country's behavior and so on. And on the other hand, we do things that are diametrically opposed to the things that we say we believe in. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe in the importance of Canadian values and principles in promoting human rights abroad. But we cannot do it in a hypocritical way. And we especially cannot do it to our own citizens. We're not talking about foreigners, we're talking about Canadians. They happen to be Chinese Canadians, or Muslim Canadians, or Palestinian Canadians, or Arab Canadians, whatever they may be. But the way we treat them is contrary to what we say other countries should be doing. And while there was a time when we could pretend this was not happening, and just sort of say, well, it's worse somewhere else, it's not as bad here, I think it's becoming quite clear to everyone now that it is just as bad. And our unwillingness to call out some of the downright racist and discriminatory and abusive policies of our friends and allies, our unwillingness to do that makes us even more hypocritical. And all of our leaders are doing that. I'm not attacking a certain party, I'm saying this is true of all political leaders. So the opportunity here is that Canadians who come from other parts of the world, who belong to visible minority groups, who maybe are part of other kinds of minorities, whatever issues they have that are not part of the mainstream, I think they're beginning to see the importance of allyship, the importance of having to work together with other groups, even though you don't understand them. Maybe you don't even agree with some of the things that they believe in. The importance of working with them if we want to achieve a common goal. So I thank you for raising that question. If we are able to get this organization up and running, one of the first things we have to do is to reach out to these communities and find out how we can work together.
Yeah.
I'll make this really short. That's a very, very good question. I want to thank you for attending this event. Senator will talk about allyship, and I'll give you some real examples. When I took over S.U.C.C.E.S.S. In 2006, the first thing I did was to take the board of S.U.C.C.E.S.S. to visit the Gurudwara, the South Asian, the Sikh temple, and introduce ourselves to them and ask them to come visit us. The second thing I did was I took them to meet with the Jewish Congress of BC. The third thing I did was to help also introduce them to the Korean community people. Because I think there are strength in number, there's strength in understanding. We built highways, we built tunnels, billions of dollars every year, taxpayers' money, to connect geographic communities. Vancouver to Surrey, Surrey to Richmond. But how much money our government spend connecting cultural communities? One is geographic, we spend billions of dollars. The other one is cultural, we spend $0. You see the picture? See what's wrong with it? If the government is not doing it, then it's up to us. Community organizations do it. So I really encourage, as Senator Wu says, build connection between communities. And in fact, Dr. Wang can also tell you that I encourage her to go to a protest from other communities and invite other communities to join her protest. Because if we do not stand up when one segment of the community is being oppressed, then when you are being oppressed, who are going to support you? So that's the story, and that's what we need to do. Thank you.
I try to make gender balance, all right?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Try to make it so. Yeah, for our organizations, Chinese Cultural Center of Greater Vancouver, yeah, we already do something like that. We try to reach out to other organizations, other communities, and I have another organizations. I work for another organizations with Yuen, so we Storm Anti-Asian Hate Advocacy Group. So we already did that, and as Tung Chan said, we try to join the others communities protest. But the important things, my suggestions to our communities, try to, especially for the young generation like me or somebody, you study here, you work here, write Richard, right? Write English. Right. We need to write more English articles. We have a website, Voices and Bridges. If you write some English articles, you can email to me, we can publish it. We need to let other communities know what the facts here, right? 所以我们大家多写英文的文章，像 Lydia, Richard, Will, I know they're written a lot of young generations. You can do that, and I will try. Okay.
Well, I should say that thank you everyone. That is really amazing discussion and speech. And also I need to give myself a round of applause because I control time. So now we have 10 minutes left for our last but not I may ruin your record.
I think you gave yourself congratulations too early. talk too much. Thank you, everyone. For all the participants, Senator Wu, for all the speakers for inspiring. I'm just here to represent myself, obviously, not UBC, but I'm also here on behalf of an organization which we have our chair, actually, John Price over here, and a co-chair, Xiaobei Chen, professor at Carleton. It's an advisory group. It's called the Canada-China Focus, so CCF, has come together as a non-partisan space for conversations on critical issues related to Canada-China relations. We are deeply concerned that the current upsurge of anti-Asian racism and xenophobia in Canada is affecting people and communities across the country. We've heard that today so powerfully. We've heard it from individuals like Professor Sito. So we're concerned about this, not just because it's affecting policy and affecting communities, but we think that it's also, as as Senator Yuen Wu said, it's also allowing for a resurgence of racism that is under the cover of anti-China rhetoric, that in fact you are seeing a resurgence of racism in general. And so I think that's actually really something crucial to bring out of this conversation today. On our vision, I think the Canada-China focus is it's only through actually creating spaces like this one today, where we can speak openly without fear that you're going to be investigated, that's the only way we're going to have the conversations we need. And so again, our vision is to facilitate constructive public conversations that develop a better understanding of China and Canada-China relations. And I wanted to actually kind of highlight some of the things that were said today as well. And to maybe, because I'm a historian, also put it somewhat into the historical context that in fact many of our speakers already did. But I just want to highlight some of that. And one of those things is that 100 years ago, and we were a part of the groups that worked with Senator Wu to mark that 100th anniversary. And across the street, it was my students and others at UBC that helped Catherine Clement curate paper trails about that Chinese Exclusion Act 100 years ago. But one of the reasons we put all that effort was not to say that's past history and that now, we're a better country. We are a better country, but we are also still affected by those legacies. And I'll bring you back to just 5 years ago and 10 years ago. 10 years ago was when foreign buyers, remember foreign buyers tax, and everybody knew who a foreign buyer was. When you said foreign buyer, you didn't say American. It wasn't Steven Spielberg's house up in the West Bank. A foreigner looked like me, right? Looked like many people in this room. And it didn't matter if we were sort of talking about speaking English with a Chinese accent. I can speak English with it, or I can speak Chinese with an English accent. That's he speaks English, or he speaks Chinese with an English accent. But it didn't matter if you didn't speak any Chinese. It was the way you looked. You were already under suspicion. Right? And all those foreigners who were. It didn't matter that you were fourth generation, Chinese, Canadian, third generation. You could be actually Indonesian. It didn't matter, right? Because we could mistake you for being foreign. And that was just 10 years ago. And that really laid the groundwork for what happened 5 years ago. If you recall, if in that period from December to Lunar New Year, we're just like wearing masks. So many Hong Kong Chinese, people in Toronto, people wore masks because that was the lesson they had learned from SARS. They knew that something like this was going to be transmitted and you wear a mask. And they didn't go to Chinese restaurants, even though that's what you do at Lunar New Year. You pay your debts. If someone helped you, you said, I need to thank you before the end of this year, before we start a new year fresh, right? So let's go give some cha. People weren't going. And what was the reaction? Not that, maybe there's something here, they know what they're doing. Maybe they're experienced through SARS. is a lesson that no, it was they're wearing masks. They must be diseased. Chinese, it's a Chinese flu. It's them. And so it was both at the same time a misunderstanding, a misreading of what people in many Chinese Canadian communities were doing, and an excuse to act and say, to be racist. Just say China's always the problem. China's the problem for affordable housing. China's the problem for this. China's the problem for that. Foreigners are a problem. This new COVID, they're the problem. They wear masks. You see, they must be sick. Right? That was just 5 years ago. So these are all related. When the tool you have is investigation, suspicion, when that's your hammer, surveillance, if that's your tool, then all problems look like nails. Right? And that's a saying, if you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail to you. And, so and that's why, and that's what we are in, that's what Senator Wu was talking about. Right? When it's about investigating, when it's this, when it's that, then hammer, hammer, hammer. You don't see that our greatest threat economically, maybe 25% tariffs from our neighbor. No, of course that's just the president, and there's allies in the government. You see as human the problem, whereas Chinese, they're not human. We're just always looking for the nail to hammer. And that is what I think all our speakers are raising. But what do you do? That's the challenge. That's the thing we face. So what do we do? And here's, I think, where some historical lessons. This place, the Chinese Cultural Center, it's an umbrella organization. It brought together many organizations in Chinatown to build this. 100 years ago, before that 1923 Act, even 50 years before, when anti-Chinese racism began really flare, organizations, they didn't like each other. Many of our Chinatown clan associations are district associations. You're from Toisan, we're from Huoping. We don't get along, right? But they came together and formed an umbrella association, the Chinese Benevolent Association. In San Francisco, they formed the Chinese Benevolent Association. In Seattle, they formed one. And they hired a lawyer. The best lawyers in town put on retainer to fight this legislation. They organized the Lunar New Year Parade, which tomorrow will happen here. Why? Not because it's a Chinese ancient Confucian secret to get together and have lion dances in the streets. This is not actually traditional. It was created in overseas Chinese communities, in Chinatowns, in order to provide a different positive representation, the way that Tung Chan is saying, to counter these negative representations that you are a threat, you are. So coming together, that is an opportunity, it's a necessity in the way that I think many of our speakers have pointed out. But it's sometimes not enough. And the reason why is because coming together, it can be weaponized too, that you're a threat, right? They're now organizing it, and they're raising money. Oh my God. Because it's a real threat now. Because success is a threat. And we appreciate the courage in sharing. Look at your qualifications. That's the problem. The success of the Chinese 100 years ago was not their inferiority. It was the success that was the threat. And that's what we face again, is you can take out your qualification. I can say, I went and did a PhD, and that doesn't help. In fact, it can be weaponized against you again. And so that challenge leads to the question of, one, the courage to speak. And again, thank you, Ali, for always speaking out, not just today, but before in your writing. Jimmy, many of you. But courage also, I think, on hearing today, and this is the point I'll leave you with. Courage is also not to demonize your enemy. is not to begin to say, if there's us and them, then we have to do us and them. We have to respond in kind. It's reaching out to allies, but that's not just to say, I need help, come help me. I'm going after to this, I'm going to get into an EVO, I'm going to go to Sunset Community Center because Punjabi market, they're going to try to imagine what Punjabi market should be like. Just like Chinatown's trying to imagine what it should be like. That's a reason to be allied together. Right? To work together on helping bring in more business and more people into the streets of Chinatown. Work with Punjabi market. Don't go to them and say, hey, we're facing racism, now let's talk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Hogan's Alley Society. Hogan's Alley may have been taken away by the same Georgia Viaduct that took out some of our society buildings. But they're not the enemy. They're our allies. They've faced some of these same things historically. And so courage sometimes is about actually the hard conversation, not to demonize someone you disagree with, but to come together and say, despite our disagreements about many things, about Taiwan, about Hong Kong, about Xinjiang, about, we may disagree, but there is a larger threat too in this place in Canada, to our place here, our belonging here. And I think that may be one of the things that to me is so moving and inspiring about today, coming together and speaking openly. To be able to say, we should get together and protect those in need of protection, those who've been demonized, those who've been smeared, their reputations ruined. Senator Wu, some of the attacks on a sitting Canadian senator, it's horrifying, some of the things that are being said about Senator Wu. So coming to the defense and aid of others, not to fight. That metaphor, I think, is very, then we need to go us and them, and we need to fight them. But to say, how can we find a way to actually find a space to talk this through, to say, look, why are you so able to allow the Trumps and Americans, and not demonize America and Americans, but something from China, then it's just a threat. So I'll say that again, thanks to Kenny. Now I'll thank you, because I'll cut myself. But I'm really inspired. I think we should all be inspired by the speakers, so thanks again, everybody. Please give a hand to... If we can, again, Senator Wu, if there's a way we can help, this way, a vehicle for coming together and protecting without demonizing again those who are in disagreement with us. We have to overcome those disagreements among us. Thank you.
Now, this brings us to an excellent conclusion of today's event. I hope everyone has some good takeaways, and your Sunday New Year afternoon is, Saturday. is well spent, and your time is well spent with us. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.